Alright everyone, it's time for Occult Literature video number 140, Valhalla, The Myths of Norseland. A very good work. It's got an interesting little aside in the beginning and a very helpful index. It's 110 pages by Julia Clinton-Jones, you know, a better Clinton than maybe the recent ones we've suffered through. As always, link in the description to my edition of this work on Amazon. Second and third links to my books blogs. I'm going to actually have to reformat some of the categories again pretty soon because I'm getting so many titles that the lists on some of them are getting kind of long. And I'm working on a few more works within herbalism and medicine at this point, just to flesh that category out because it's, you know, I think the shortest at this point. This is a decent work of Norse mythology. And what it contains are simply these poetic sort of tales up through, you know, Mimir's Well and the punishment of Loki, up through Ragnarok, and then also the one that no one ever talks about, the regeneration post-Ragnarok. A lot of people in the realm of the occult, if they're into the prediction and end time sort of stuff, which is sort of a little spooky woo on the side at times, historically speaking, very interesting, but people keep getting it wrong. When you get like the 2012 or the Ragnarok prediction sort of stuff, they always forget about the regeneration. When people in the West think of the end times, they tend to think of the uttermost complete end, nothing else happens after, or it's the complete end of physicality, and then you get like, you know, New Jerusalem or something. That's not the way that the pagans tended to look at things. The Norse religion looked at it as just, oh, yeah, you got your Fimbulwinter, and then, you know, Ragnarok concludes, things are destroyed, the earth is, you know, burned up, and then it regenerates. You know, there's this one little pocket that was left behind, new Adam and Eve, the gods sort of, you know, are reborn, come back, and everything's hunky-dory, like there's no evil anymore, and it's like heaven, basically. Now, the author overlaps that, and the gods as well, and that in a not 100% accurate fashion, to tell the truth. Tries to overlap them with the Roman gods as well as Christianity, sort of drawing conclusions between them. You've got to understand, in this period of time, there's an erosion of the old order of academia, which was only interested in Rome and Greece for the most part. You had a rising interest in Egypt, a rising interest in Babylon, certainly, and a rising interest in Norse mythology, as well as the Mesoamericans, the Far East. All of these things begin around the time that this work was actually penned, in the wake of the Napoleonic era. With some of the early proto-archaeology, people start thinking, maybe there's more to history than just, hey, there was the Bible times and then the Roman Empire, and then basically, you know, now we're here. Now we're civilized. The only other people that were ever civilized were Romans, and everything else is kind of, you know, it's utopian, like the Greeks is so great, their poems and stuff, and everything else didn't exist. It was total barbarism. Now, of course, we know that's not entirely the case. In fact, it couldn't be further from the truth. But until that point in history, there was not much of a focus placed on these other things, and so she's one of the authors saying, hey, you know, there are other interesting myths too, but in order to make it seem interesting, you have to overlap it with the end-all, be-all of antiquity, which was Rome. And so she's saying, well, Thor is kind of like Jupiter, explaining it for an audience that knew nothing about Norse mythology, in other words. You know, this is the Norse Venus. That's the Norse Cupid. It's sort of stuff like that. And it doesn't always fit. Like, Thor is not necessarily the greatest stand-in for Jupiter, despite the whole thunder thing. In that sense, yes, it's an apt comparison, but it's not 100%. I don't think that the Norse at the time would have liked to be compared to the Romans. And the Romans actually had that habit. But it's interesting nonetheless. It's a good compilation of Norse poetry, essentially, in a semi-rhyming scheme. It's a little bit different from modern poetry in the way that it flows. More of that epic poetry, as opposed to now you would have, you know, all these weird, like, almost mathematical formats, and things tend to be very flowery. It's just about love or something. This, it tells an actual long story all the way up through, you know, the killing of Balder. Loki is like, haha, you know, and I'm going to keep him from resurrecting by not crying. I'm going to take on the form of, I believe, this giant. And then when the gods find out it was Loki, they're like, oh, shit. And then they chain him to the rocks, and venom is dripping down on him, and his wife has to catch it in a bowl, basically. And every time that the bowl fills and she has to empty it to catch more, some of it drips on his face, and his agonizing screams and writhing causes earthquakes. It's sort of a geological explanation. It's very, very interesting material to look at, actually. And to a lot of people, have said to me I didn't have enough works on paganism actually available. I do have quite a few, a backlog to edit through. So this is the first of those that I intend to release, but I've got to do a few of the sort of quack medicine herbal works, and then go back to paganism. And I know through this year, this is going to be like the year of paganism and herbals, to tell the truth. It's going to be a little bit more academic than on the grimoire side. Although there's some work to be done there too, so it's going to be interesting. Again, link in the description to my edition of this work on Amazon. I highly recommend it, and second and third links to my books, blogs. If you're into pagan stuff, there is a little bit more there. I believe there's one about the list of forbidden books within Catholicism, actually, which sort of overlaps with Romanism. Pagan ideas of immortality would be another one. And there are a few others as well, mostly in the scriptures category or within the academic category. That's about all. Peace out.